My name is Mark Biernat, and I'm getting a PhD in economics. This video discusses why we will never have another Great Depression again. That is my claim. And my sub-hypothesis to that is this time is different. Now, stay with me during the whole video and you'll hear my arguments and my logic. And if you haven't yielded to the logic of what I'm trying to say, leave a comment below and respectfully disagree, or disrespectfully, and I can unwind your ideas or your comments. But my premise, my underlying premise is, this time is different. We will not have another Great Depression like we did in the 1930s, because we live in a different world. And I'm giving you 5 reasons why. There are other reasons, subsidiary reasons, but these are 5 primary reasons why we'll never have a Great Depression. And before I get into the reasons, the high-level idea is 1930s, it was an industrial society, factories and smokestacks. We were coming off the heels of WW1. Today, we live in a postmodern society. And I'm not just talking about the economics of it, but the whole collective unconsciousness of humanity has shifted. So let's talk about the concrete economic reasons why we won't have another Great Depression. And that's my premise and my claim, and here it goes. First reason is wealth. My father was born in 1927, and he's doing fine now. He lives in Jupiter. I actually said in Jupiter, not on Jupiter, so I'm not referring to the planet, but the seaside town in South Florida. But when he grew up, all he kept on saying is, we didn't have anything. We had nothing. And they really didn't have anything. He was fortunate that both his parents were hardworking, and they were fortunate enough to put clothes on their back and have food on the table. But 32.5% of the people, for example, in the city of Philadelphia, where he grew up, really didn't have adequate food. And we're not talking about the food of today. We're talking about, the food of yesteryear, having not enough food, you could play a xylophone on somebody's ribs. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. If you don't have enough food, you can play a xylophone on their ribs. But the food of today, people are claiming, I'm poor. What does poor mean today? Poor means today, I see some big-boned, quote-unquote, husky person driving up to a fast food stop with an SUV on their cell phone, and they're going to take it back and watch on their flat screen some streaming device. For me, that's not poor. Okay, when I was in different parts of the world, I saw older ladies, and I'm talking probably approaching 80 years old, pulling water out of a well because they don't have plumbing. Okay, they don't have plumbing, and so poor is and wealth is a relative thing. So when we're talking about the Great Depression back in the 1930s, people were universally not as well off as they are today, and I'm talking particularly in these industrialized countries. It's a different story if you're talking about other developing countries. But, like in college, I burned a couch, okay? The reason I burned the couch was for heating. And this is what people do. If you don't have heating, you burn furniture, right? And, people in other parts of the world where I've lived, they burn furniture. They'll burn their couch. I wouldn't recommend it. It's kind of stinky. We burned it and then we all had to escape. But this is what people do. This is what poor people do. In America, I don't see people like, poor people lining up on a bread line hoping they'll get 2 slices of bread and you can play a xylophone on their ribs and then they go back and burn a couch. But in America, everybody's got SUVs and smartphones and, so the relative wealth is a very relative thing. So are you telling me that there'll be another Great Depression where we'll have that scenario that, my father had in the 1920s? And I find it highly improbable if you put it in the context of the absolute wealth effect. And wealth, once you have this buoyancy, it's kind of like a boat or a plane. Let's say a boat. Once you're at a certain level, it takes a long time for that boat to go down, the tide to go down. And it may never go back that far down. The Great Depression was like a super moon, full moon, high tide, low tide situation. So just by virtue of the wealth, and when there's a lot of wealth going around, people are sustained in and of itself. It's not like cars will start popping away and disappearing, poof, and houses, poof, off the street. The wealth exists. A depression is really just a reallocation. Okay, so that's number one. The number one reason, it's not the primary reason, but it is a reason, is wealth. Wealth perpetuates itself. Nothing succeeds like success. And we, in a modern society, have wealth. Okay, number two is probably the most important thing is technology. Techs, okay? If you read a book, Less Than Zero by George Selgin, he's a PhD, I highly recommend it. Or even Jeff Booth, The Price of Tomorrow. I think he owns kind of like a Home Depot up in Canada or something like that. They make very strong arguments that technology just pushes the, frontier of possibilities outward and in a better situation. I mean, come on, we have space travel, AI. We have platforms. What are platforms? Platforms are things like Uber, Airbnb, Etsy, eBay. During the shutdown, everybody and their mother was selling things on eBay. So, it makes the market more competitive, and we're allowed to participate in the market forces. And with technology, we bring more minds online and all over the world to create a comparative advantage. Alternative energies, who knows? Someday we might have a perpetual motion machine. Wouldn't that be great? I mean, we're getting closer to that perpetual motion machine. So when that much productivity with robotics, etc., is being generated just sheerly by technology of building a better mousetrap, then you know that society is better off. How do I know that humankind is going to do this? Because I'm almost like OCD. I wake up in the morning and all I say is, what am I going to do next? Well, my brain, I just can't shut it off. I'm always problem solving. And what do I do to relax? I play chess. My brain is always going. And this is pretty much reflective of the rest of humanity. We are all thinking and figuring out ways to improve our lives. And we're using technology. So technology creates this windfall, this buoyancy in the economy that it can even be anticipated. Sure, I know in the 1930s and 20s there was electrification. That's nothing compared to supercomputers, nanotechnology, AI, robotics, space travel. They were on the beginning of an S-curve. We're just starting that S-curve. Okay, the next thing is flexible wages. Now, you only have unemployment, you only have a Great Depression if there's inflexibility in wages, because the idea here is workers don't want to accept a pay cut. So if the variable cost to a firm, a factory, is they only have so much money in the till to spread around for wages, instead of telling everybody across the board, oh yeah, you're going to get a 20% wage cut, nobody would accept it. They have this idea that you're going to lay people off. Looks good for the shareholders, et cetera, et cetera. But that's the way it was. Nowadays, and the other thing is, my dad and my dad's generation, maybe they had 2 jobs their whole life, maybe 1. Today, if you're not hopping jobs every, couple of years, there's something wrong with you, in the sense that, you're not innovating and trying and experimenting and broadening your skills. So many people do this internally in the same company, so I don't want to, disparage anybody, but there's a lot of flexibility in the labor force. If you get fired or you get laid off or sacked or whatever, you just go find a job down the street. And I'm telling you, it is like the new crisis of today is simply, we can't find enough workers. And that will continue. So in contrast to the post or the industrial time of the 1930s, it was a unemployment epidemic. Now it's an overemployment. There's just they just can't find enough workers. So for a Great Depression to occur, you've got to really have a unemployment situation. And I'm talking like 25%. I'm not talking 5%, which is basically, you've got this, some people are just transitionally unemployed perpetually, frictional unemployment. That was a major event. And again, if you're unemployed during the Great Depression, you don't eat. And that brings me to my next point, the safety net. The government has a safety net. And in the Great Depression, you don't have a job, you don't have money, you don't eat. In America today, in half the world, SNAP, Medicaid, Medicare, unemployment benefits, every other kind of benefit you can imagine. And the concrete evidence I would suggest you look, I don't see too many people in America, without a cell phone and you can play xylophone on their ribs. In fact, I would say that I think even the government will finance part of your cell phone bill because they consider that a necessary, item. And people are, hemming and hawing about getting their college paid, whether that's right or wrong. So you've got this safety net, and you've got the incredible safety net that gives it these automatic stabilizers in the economy. If Y equals, C plus I plus G, the G takes over when C and I are down. I know it's Keynesian economics, and I'm not a Keynesian at all, but there's a little bit of truth to that. So the idea that there's these economic stabilizers with a safety net kind of buffers this falling. And so we've got a lot of good ideas here. We've got wealth, technology, flexible wages, and safety net. But the last thing that's important, I'm a monetary economist, it's a bold statement, but I'm going to say this time is different with monetary policy. People are saying, oh, well, the Federal Reserve is going to, create a monetary shock that will have implications, systemic implications all through the real economy. And that was the argument during the Great Depression. Federal Reserve kept the interest rates well below the bank rate, the natural rate of interest. I have another video, you can check it out on that. Natural rate of interest is really the equilibrium rate, or let's say the expected profit rate, Knut-Wicksell. And they kept it well below this for an extended period of time because they didn't understand this monetary policy. But monetary policy today, whether they understand or have learned from that, they do have a little bit of awareness, and so does society. Everyone that is in the financial markets is looking at the Federal Reserve under a microscope. So there's no surprises here. They can create, again, systemic disruptions through incorrect monetary policy or less than optimal monetary policy. But I can't see that it will have that. It's like a catastrophic event like occurred in the 1930s. So my fifth reason is monetary policy, although not always optimal, is a little bit better managed. And as a corollary to that, you say, well, what about the debt? You always have to look at the debt in relation to the GDP. And Japan has probably one of the highest debt to GDP ratios in the world, over 200. Their currency has been doing okay for the last 30 years. Maybe it could have been a better society economically, or they could have been on a more optimal growth path, but there's no collapse, okay? That's in the realm of YouTube, people trying, there's a whole cottage industry out there telling you about, Malthusian predictions about the world. And I am not a Malthusian. I'm an optimist. I believe this is a time of hope, space travel, open markets, free movement of labor and capital. All these things blow away any negative arguments about, they're doing something wrong in the Federal Reserve. Granted, I'd like a better monetary policy, free banking, gold standard, or at least a monetary policy guided by principles like a natural rate of interest that is looking at the original works of Knut-Wicksell. But that's not going to take the economy off the course so much because we've got wealth. We've got incredible technology. People can't even comprehend how magnificent that is for the world. Okay? We've got flexible wages, people hopping and jumping all over the place. And we've got a better monetary policy. So in conclusion, we will not have another Great Depression, and I'm very happy about that. We will have some business cycles going up and down and recessions, but with all the new regulations, the automatic stabilizers, whether you say it's good or bad, and the incredible wealth and technology and flexibility of our society, it's not going to be the 1930s. And if you disagree, leave a comment below. Like the video anyway, because it is a pretty bold claim that I'm making. And my sub-hypothesis, things will be different. is an interesting claim. But leave a comment below if you have you disagree, and I will try to unwind each component of your comment. And if you agree, tell me that you agree. But thank you very much. My PhD studies are not specifically on the business cycle, but it is on monetary policy. Thank you. Have a great day.